Welcome to the Mandala Podcast, where we help you feel your best body, mind, and soul. Hi there, this is Charlie McDermott back in the studio with Bree Jaworski. Bree, how you
I'm
doing?
awesome, Charlie. How are you?
I'm awesome. Going to be awesomer after spending some time with you today because I am always learning.
Maybe, or
And
traumatized. We're not sure yet.
no, it's all good. I don't think you can ever overdo it when it comes to just learning about yourself and others around you for that matter, because we're all navigating and I believe truly trying to improve, and we're I think we're put on this planet for a reason, and it's that journey, and we're not here to just like eat cake every day and
Right.
put our feet up, and there's no fun in
Well,
that.
yeah,
So
I agree. And yeah, if I can even just help a little bit with giving some information on a few things, awesome. I agree.
yeah.
I am all about learning. I learn like a million different things every single day. Not a million, but a lot of different things every day. And some of them stick, some of them don't. But
Yeah. Well, and then the fun part about that, you learn, but then that leads you to other things you don't know. So it's just like this spider effect, right? You learn
right,
more and more and more. It becomes more and more interesting.
right.
Which you sent me notes on today's topic, and I've heard of the narcissist,
Yes.
right? And I never really fully stopped and said, well, really, what is that? And so your topic today on the narcissistic personality disorder,
Mhm.
I love what you have in mind here, and the way you teach is just so much fun. So I'm going to turn this over to you, and let's start with just filling our listeners in. I guess at the basic level, that narcissistic personality disorder. What is that?
Yeah. So, first of all, the fact that you don't really know that much about it and are not really like, you know, um, needing to know much about it makes me think you probably have healthy people in your life. So, that's probably a good thing to start off with. It's the people that tend to know a
Mm,
lot about this, uh, other than people in my field, obviously, but just the average person that knows a lot about this tends to have somebody that they've encountered, whether it be like a boss or sometimes a partner or something like that, which has kind of
yeah.
led them down that rabbit hole of learning a lot about it. And typically they've been affected in a negative way by someone. So the fact that you don't know that much about it, I'm going to take that as a good sign.
Oh,
So
boy.
narcissistic personality disorder. This is part of the series that we're doing on cluster B personality disorders. So we're gonna tune in with this one today, and I really just want to talk about basically there's three different kind of like nuances when it comes to narcissistic personality disorder. And we hear, like you said, we hear that word a lot, like he's a narcissist, she's a narcissist.
Right.
And you can have some of these traits and not necessarily have this disorder. So I want to also put that out there. Narcissistic traits are much more common than having narcissistic personality disorder itself. So
Okay.
you may the proverbial you may be listening and thinking like, "Oh, that fits so many people that I can think of," you know? But in reality, they have to fit, there's I think 9 criteria, points to the actual diagnosis, and they would have to hit like 5 out of 9 in order to have the actual official diagnosis of a narcissistic personality disorder. However, we're gonna talk about some of the different nuances that we see on a clinical side and some of the different presentations like we talked about last time with borderline. There are some different presentations to the actual diagnosis, so same thing with this one. So we're going to talk about those different types, and I want to also give you some examples and some sort of like pop culture references that maybe people might be able to pick up on, like from movies or TV references and things like that. So
Fun. Fun.
yeah, so okay, so let's get started. So the first one is kind of the textbook what we all think of when we think of a narcissist. So the example I'm going to give first of all before I kind of tell you a little bit about it is the character of Miranda Priestley from The Devil Wears Prada. So it's Meryl Streep's character. So she's this very very overbearing boss and kind of a nightmare to work with, hence the name Devil Wears Prada. And so anyway, so this kind of textbook narcissism, it's it's very tends to be very negative. Affects
Yeah.
both the person and others around them. The people tend to have kind of an overinflated sense of self-importance. They think that they're very, very important, whether in reality they are or not, and going back to this example, this person's job puts them in a position of power over other people and therefore like kind of solidifying this over in self-importance. And
Mhm.
yeah, so a very strong preoccupation with kind of fantasies of success and power. So they get very preoccupied with just very kind of hungry for success and power and a need for admiration. That's like a very big part of it. And in this movie, going back to the reference of the movie, the character very much needs like that admiration from other people, and if she doesn't get it, she gets very angry, and very she's very
Yeah.
outward in like her presentation. So, and
Right.
another thing is a sense of entitlement. So very entitled. Lack of empathy is a big one with narcissistic personality disorder in general. So we see this a lot with this personality disorder, as well as another one that we're going to cover soon, which is the antisocial personality disorder. And one of the main components to that and this one and how they overlap a little bit is really just a lack of empathy. So,
Hmm.
what statistically, what we have found is that a lot of high ranking corporate officials, such as CEOs of companies and things like that, tend to have maybe not the full diagnostic criteria for a personality disorder, but they might have narcissistic traits or they might have antisocial traits because of that lack of empathy. Kind of like they're willing to do whatever, take whomever down, walk all over whomever to
Yeah.
get to the top kinda thing. So,
Yeah.
we see that a lot.
But it seemingly in the movie reference that you
Yeah.
see, those narcissists, there's always that point in the movie where it looks like maybe they've seen the light
Yes.
and they're about to, be empathetic
Yes.
and you think, "Ah, finally they're getting," and then
Nope.
no, they go right back to the other side of
Right.
the line and
And
just
so in a real life perspective on something like that, if some like, for instance, if someone did not necessarily meet the criteria for the actual personality disorder, that's when we might see a sort of turn, but if someone meets the
yeah.
actual true narcissistic personality disorder criteria, there's no turn. It's just that's just the way it is. But
And
yeah, you're right. I was
and
thinking about that
and
movie and you're 100% right. You're like, "Oh, she's gonna be" no, she's not gonna be
Nah.
nice. Like a false
And she had
sense.
such an opportunity.
Yes,
Oh,
right. Absolutely. So,
uh,
but yeah, just
s
the major kind of exploitative behavior in this case, much so with her employees and the people that work for her and things like that. But
yeah,
it could be put
yeah,
into any context where, and a lot of times they are in a position of power because they have this kind of grandiose sense of self to where like
yeah,
a menial job just would never do. Like it has to be a big high powered job of like respect and importance. Otherwise, they feel like the job wouldn't be good enough for them, and so, unfortunately, they are a lot of times given a position of power over other people, which can be very exploitative and harmful to other
yeah.
people. So, another example of this in a different context would be the character of Joan Crawford's character in Mommy Dearest. So that would be more so
No,
like a parental role, obviously, but we can see for
right.
anybody that's kind of an older reference, but for anybody that's seen that movie, the childhood, the Christina who is the daughter had a very, very difficult childhood growing up with her mom, who very much fits the bill for this kind of textbook narcissist parent. And have you seen the movie, Charlie?
I did as a
Yeah.
kid. The only thing I can remember is the coat hanger
Yes. Yes.
scene. That's it. Whenever you hear the movie, I just think coat hanger.
Yes, right. So no wire coat hangers. We had to everything had to be a certain way, her
Yeah.
way, which was the only way. And what
Yeah.
happens in a situation where you have a narcissistic parent, we could do a whole podcast just on that, but having a narcissistic parent is very, very difficult because you're constantly trying to please them. You're constantly trying to lift them up because they are constantly
Yeah.
seeking that out of other people. They expect people to kind of bow down to them, to worship them, almost like a god complex. So having a parent like that
Hmm.
can be very difficult in a lot of ways because you feel almost just like you're never measuring up, you're never good enough, that kind of
Right.
thing.
Right.
So that would be another
Wow.
example of that, in a different context. So
Yeah.
narcissistic
Yeah.
parents are very,
Good one.
very, very harmful to their children, but
Now, do these individuals, do they see any of this? I mean, at what point, do they need like the bottom out in life before they go, maybe I need to change? I mean,
yeah.
how does that typically happen?
It's hard to say for sure, but I think because of the lack of empathy, I think it's not so much that they don't realize they're doing it, it's more so that they just don't care that they're doing it.
Yeah.
So when
Yeah.
you get
Yeah.
somebody in a situation where like that, where, it's not that they're totally oblivious to the fact that they're harming others or they're stepping on others or, whatever the case may be. It's more so that they just have that lack of empathy. It just doesn't allow for them to care. And so when you don't really
Yeah.
care about your behavior and how it's affecting other people, the, facilitation of change is like not very probable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Good
having a
point.
parent like that again would be having a boss like that, like in The Devil Wears Prada, that's one thing, you're not stuck there, you
Yeah.
can walk away from that situation. I'm sure it's a nightmare in the time, but having a parent like
Right.
that is a whole 'nother ballgame, so,
Yeah.
um, but
Wow.
yeah, so let's get on to the second
Okay.
presentation. I know. Lovely,
Hey.
lovely people we were dealing with here. Um,
Uh,
all right. So the second is the very grandiose presentation of narcissism. And this is very, very stereotypical of what we see a lot in public figures. So we see this a lot
mm,
in politicians, in like high
yeah.
ranking public office, things like that. The very that's the thing. So here's one of the things that you should know about narcissistic personality disorder in general. Typically, on the outside, unless they are that very negative textbook, what we were just talking about, if they fall more into this second category, they're typically very liked. They come
Hmm.
across to the outside world, they come across very charismatic. A lot of times they're very outspoken, very bold. They have kind of an assertive behavior that makes people feel like they can be trusted. Um,
Mhm.
whether that is true or not, it doesn't really matter to the narcissist because their whole thing is they, again, need like that admiration. They need those followers. And speaking of the word follower, we see this a lot on social media now because
Mm,
people get very self-involved. They're very involved in their appearance. Their appearance is very important to them, whether that be like aesthetically or just like how they're portrayed. The number of followers that they have is very important to them. So we have this whole like weird subset of
yeah.
narcissistic behavior going on with social media now, which is concerning in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
the person that's the first person to speak out about things and very loud and proud and but the problem with this person is a lot of times they very much overestimate their actual abilities, and so the grandiose persona that they have is not really deep rooted in anything substantial. So it's really just this feeling and thought that they have about themselves being so great and so wonderful and so powerful and this and that, which is a lot of times kind of backed up by the fact that they do have people listening to them or following them or, asking for advice from them and things like that, which kind of just like bolsters them up into this again, like it's kind of a fluff of nothing. Like it's nothing, there's no foundation to them having all of this knowledge or power or anything. It's just kind of a self-perception, which can be dangerous if you
Wow.
think about it.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
You know, it brings to mind, since we're talking about TV shows and movies and all that. I'm reading a book on WeWork
Uh-huh.
and Adam Newman. There was a Netflix. Actually, Anne Hathaway, who was in Devil Wears
Yeah.
Prada, she plays the wife,
Okay.
Rebecca, of Adam Newman, and Adam is oh, what's his name? Dallas Buyers Club. Uh, Not Matthew Conaughey, but the other. I think he got an Oscar for it. But anyway,
Mhm.
um, he so just so he took this real estate company, but convinced everyone around him that it was a tech
Uh-huh.
company, so that the valuation would be, God knows, 10 times or what more.
Right.
So he was able to convince the investors. I mean, we're talking like mutual fund
Yes.
companies and investment companies that this deserved a huge valuation.
Right.
And he's all about tech, but he could barely use a
Oh my
computer.
goodness.
But you read some of the and I don't think he was that bad of a guy. I think he had a vision, but
Right.
he he had a very, very big personality, and he would movies, TVs, you never know the real life
Right.
person. But
Right.
it seemed like empathy wasn't, high up on his trait of
Yes.
DNA or whatever. Yeah.
Right. And you can see how people can kind of like get lost in that, and like
Yeah.
not really the truth of the matter or the facts, but rather just the presentation. And that's the thing.
Bingo.
It's all about presentation for this like grandiose version of narcissists.
Yeah.
You know, um, a couple examples that come to mind. One of them's kind of funny, but the Dictator, the movie The Dictator, which, stars Sacha Baron Cohen, and that's very much a
Yeah.
comedy, but, like, he's the general, president, admiral, like, gives himself every title, I think his name
Right.
is, like, Aladdin, and so he changes every word in the dictionary basically to Aladdin, so people get, like, very confused. They're like, because good is now Aladdin and bad is Aladdin, like, and he just
Uh-huh.
everything has to be surrounded. If the famous thing in the movie is, if anybody disagrees with him, he does this little, like, under his neck, like, off with his head, like, if they say anything against him, he's like, "Oh, yeah, it's fine, like, off with his head," So
And we'll never see you
yes,
again.
exactly, and so he would be an example of this kind of, like, grandiose,
Yeah.
narcissism, and another example would be the very popular and polarizing from the Tiger King, Joe Exotic, who's now in prison,
Right.
but very flamboyant, very big
Yeah.
personality. Thought he was the best singer, the best lion tamer, the best, XYZ, best at everything, and thought he was running for some kind of political role, and I don't know all the things about him, and it's been a while since I saw that documentary, but he's another example of just, thought he could be a politician, thought he could be and really had no experience, had no training, just this
Those
very
skills.
grandiose feeling of like, "I can do
Yeah.
anything," which is all great and good, but as you see in the
Yeah.
movie, he steps on a lot of people to get into the places that he tries to get to, so, that's kind of where the maladaptive
Yeah.
part comes in. It's not so much that like, I'm all about people believing in themselves and thinking that they can, move mountains if that's what they wanna do, but there has to
Yep.
be
Yep.
something underneath.
I have something to back it
Yes,
up. I mean,
right. It's when you get into, like, all the words and no substance
uh,
underneath that we get into a little bit of trouble with that, so, um, a
so
movie reference
question.
yeah, sure, go ahead.
We was a question for you. With your trained eye,
Yeah,
um, let's use politics as the obvious, and we don't have to get into current politics or parties or anything, but
yes.
just generally, when you see or hear a politician, are you able to tell? like, this is
So,
maybe not what we're led to believe, or how's that work for you?
yeah, I mean, the thing about it, and a lot of them say and do the same things, and so
Yeah.
that's kind of one of the things that tips me off a little bit. I'm like, "I've heard this before," or like, "I've seen this before." And, there in this country, at least, there are definitely, like, career politicians that have,
Mhm.
been politicians since, the beginning, and there are some that are true activists that I think, like, have spent their time really, like, fighting for, like, social causes and things like that, which has driven their political career. But,
Mm.
the ones that have been in politics for a long time, the kind of beauty of that for us as citizens is we have a long trail of now kind of going back and comparing things that they
Yeah.
said or did before and what they say and do now. And what I tend to notice is the people, that I would kinda consider falling into some of these categories tend to say whatever it is that they need to say in that time, whatever is
That moment.
popular at that time, and that changes, you know what I mean? If you see someone speak in the '80s or '90s versus the hot topics now, they're gonna be different, and so their
Mhm.
stance a lot of times changes depending on what audience they're
Right.
talking to. It's like they just wanna be liked, they wanna be admired, so it's like they're almost chameleons in that way, so they'll
Yeah.
change. Whereas you do have a few, I can think of very, very few that are kind of across the board. They've always thought the same things, they've fought for the same things, they've said the same things, but for the most part, especially ones that I would say fall into this category, they're very much, they're gonna say whatever is gonna get them votes. And so that's one way, and,
Yep.
you know,
Yeah.
technology is definitely not doing them any favors in that regard because we are now able to record every little thing that is ever said or done by these people, and a lot of times I think it's coming back to bite them in the end,
Uh,
so
that's a good point. Back in the day, you could have a town hall meeting and
yeah.
say whatever you need to say to appease those voters. Go to the next
Yeah,
town,
and no one would be
the
any the
complete
wiser.
opposite, if that's what you
Yeah.
right, and no one would
Yeah,
care.
but, you have these people, and I don't know if they have, like, actual jobs, but, like, they must just sit at the computer and, like, look for
Yeah,
discrepancies all day
yeah,
because they'll have, like, a montage video of, like, "Oh, he said this, and then he said this, and then he said," you know what I mean? And I'm like, "Well, I mean, they're not lying, they're right." I don't have the time to collect all that
yeah,
data, but, like, good for them, But,
yeah,
yeah, a lot of
yeah,
politicians, I would say, fall into this category, which is kind of
yeah,
scary.
yeah,
Very scary, actually, but
yeah, yeah. Quick, before we go down that rabbit hole, let's go back to
Yes.
movies.
So, the last example that I would give of someone in this category that's in a different way would be like the movie Mean Girls. So, kind of all of
Oh,
the girls in that movie might fit into this some way or another, but the main one being Regina George. She has, like, the very inflated, some sense of self. She has very high self-esteem. She thinks very, very highly of herself, her looks, her appearance, and so when she starts gaining weight and things like that, she's just, like, doesn't understand, like, doesn't like, "This could never be happening to me," like, she's just like and she'll also take down anybody in her path to get there. She does a lot of, passive aggressive type things, which is kind of more so the next category that we're gonna talk about, but I think overall she fits better into this category.
yeah, yeah.
She's definitely, but again, like, very popular in the movie, very I wouldn't say she's nice or well-liked, and that's not necessarily the reason she's popular, but she speaks her mind, she has a very
Yeah,
overinflated sense of self, and for some reason, like, there are people that are very attracted to that in different ways,
yeah,
so that would be another, like, pop culture reference for that one.
okay.
Have you seen
Good
that
one.
movie?
Oh, yeah, Tina Fey
Yeah.
classic. I mean, I love when she plays a school teacher.
Yes.
She's
There's a
awesome.
lot of people in that one. That one's a really good one. So,
Yeah,
there's a lot
yeah,
of,
yeah,
mental health stuff going on, and I could pick that whole movie apart, but yeah, we'll leave it at that for now. But, so yeah, so the third category or nuance of the narcissistic personality disorder is what we call the covert narcissist. So this one actually, kind of switching gears a little bit, is This one is actually the scariest to me because
Mm.
these are the people that are not going to be so loud and proud and
Oh, yeah.
flamboyant. They're more, passive aggressive. They're
Mm.
very they can be very vindictive, they get very defensive if anything is questioned, whether it be a principle of theirs, if they're, somehow contradicted in something or they're, any sort of criticism, they get very, very defensive and can get, sometimes aggressive, but more so passive aggressive. You see a lot of, like, revenge type, activities and things with someone like
Mm.
this, and this is the scariest because covert narcissists actually love to be in relationships with empaths, and if you think about that, that is like a recipe for absolute disaster, you know, because 'cause you've got this one person who needs this constant, like, fuel of, you know, someone loving them and caring for them and adoring them and admiring them, and then you've got this other person, this empath, who is typically very giving of those things freely, but, would be it's almost like setting a bear trap for someone, like, it's absolutely the worst combination, but, um,
Mm.
for the narcissist, it's the perfect situation for
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
relationship because they've got this constant supply of everything that they need, and it's given really, really freely and openly by the other person, but the other person will just be completely sucked dry.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes.
Yep. I can see
Yeah,
that.
so,
Wow.
but pulling from some of the other, nuances, in the beginning, this person, the kind of the covert narcissist can appear very loving, and that's where we see a lot of, like, this love bombing. That's kind of a newer term that's come out, but, you know, it's when someone enters a relationship and they're just love bombing. I mean, they say I love you very fast. They, you know, you're the most beautiful and the most wonderful. I've never met anyone like you. I've never felt this way before. Just all the things that a person would want to hear, they're hearing
Yeah.
from this person. But it's in the very beginning. So it's like there isn't really any groundwork put in, you know, to where like the person would actually have genuine feelings of these things. I mean, they're nice to hear, but like people aren't always the most rational when they are in love. And so, you know, they hear all these things, but they don't always stop to think like, "Wait, how do they love me so much when we just met 3 days
Mm.
ago?" Or why am I the best person they've ever met when they barely even know all the things about me? I haven't even told them all the things about me or definitely haven't had time to show them. So, we don't have like the most discernment necessarily when we're in love. Love can be wonderful, but it can also kind of cloud our judgment. So, um, but, you know, the love bombing very quickly turns to, um, discounting the person, making them feel crazy. We've got gaslighting and things like that. I They withhold their love a lot, so, they go from love bombing to, "I'm gonna give you the silent treatment, I'm not gonna love you, I'm not gonna give you affection, I'm not gonna give you attention," so it's very,
Mm.
it can be a very, very much roller coaster for someone in a relationship with someone with a covert narcissist, um, and the other thing about it is they tend to not really have, a really strong sense of self. So a lot of times they're just mirroring what they think the other person wants. So that's why in the beginning you may be like, I have never met such an incredible person because
Right.
they're showing you exactly what they know you want to see, and they're
Right.
very good at it. So that's why I say this version is kind of the scariest and kind of the most dangerous in regards to relationships. So I don't really have any like cool pop references for this one. This one's more like actually scary. But
Yeah.
I would say if you find yourself in a new relationship where you're feeling like this is too good to be true, like just take a step back and like really, really start to evaluate like where all of this love is coming from because a lot of times
Mm.
it is too good to be true. And I'm not a negative person and I'm the last person to tell anyone like you're moving too fast. My husband and I were engaged like within 3 months of meeting, you know, but
Uh-huh.
but he's not a narcissist. So, but if he were, that might be something that could happen as well. So you have to be you
Yeah.
kinda have to just, like,
Yeah.
know these things, especially if you're out there dating. You have to just know that these kind of people exist, unfortunately, and just, keep a little bit of a guard up, at least in the beginning when you're
Yeah.
getting to know someone. So, because I can't tell you how many people I've seen come in that, are in the middle of a divorce or coming in because they're having a dysfunctional relationship, and a lot of the things that they tell me are really textbook narcissism, but it's this covert narcissism that I think people don't know about as much, because it's not as in your face. It's much more, behind the scenes, and they're making all the plans, and they're really running the show, and it's their show. And if you don't fit into their show anymore, then they're not going to make your life very happy. So it's kind of scary.
Wow. Wow. Plus, I guess, maybe even from a friends and family standpoint, you see that individual differently because you're so close, where
Right.
everyone else is, oh, Joe's so great. What? How could you think about breaking up or whatever? Right.
100%.
Uh,
Yeah. The
yeah.
persona that they show to others is typically much different than what they would show behind
Yeah.
closed doors, and you won't see that right away either. So that's the other thing, like, you
Yeah.
have to give it a little bit of time before this person would start to kind of let their walls down and stop that mirroring to where they aren't any longer, like, feeling the need to be who you want them to be because you're already invested, you know what I mean? Like, once they've got their hooks in you, they don't need to do that anymore. It's exhausting for them anyway. Like, they just will put you down and make you think no one else will want you, and all of those, like,
Yeah.
very abusive type of things instead of, like, love
Yeah.
bombing you. Like, that only comes in the beginning, and it's short-lived. So,
Wow. Well, Bree, this has been great. It's kind of like where we started this episode. It's all about learning and growing and understanding, and this information for many, many, many folks is going to be really helpful.
yeah,
So, really appreciate you covering
I
this.
hope so.
Yeah,
Yeah, and again, if this is just a snippet of information, but
yeah,
yeah, definitely there's a lot of information out there, and if you feel like you might be in a situation sort of like this or dealing with somebody like this, like, there's definitely a lot of help out there additionally, to stuff like this.
oh, super. Well, we will look forward to hearing your wonderful voice in the next episode. Until then, keep doing what you're doing there.
Thanks, Charlie. I will see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Mandala Podcast. To learn more about Mandala counseling and health coaching, go to www.mandala-counseling.com. That's www.mandala, counseling, counseling.com, or call 239-360-1983, or visit us on Facebook or Instagram.